Hello, Lev. Good to have you in Warsaw. Welcome.
Thank you.
I want to start with a question that relates to your latest book. And the thing you've said in a couple of interviews so far is that software really influences the way we act, even if not directly using software, or even if we don't know that there is some code behind what we do. And it regards communication, human interaction, media, obviously. Could you elaborate on that so people understand what do you mean by saying that software takes control?
Yeah. Well, so I think I'll do two concrete examples, which I think are very kind of close to people's everyday life. Maybe one is more like visible software, one is a bit more invisible. So one is a Facebook. Right? So if you have hundreds of thousands of friends, and people are posting, every day. So together, it's a huge number of posts. The same thing on Twitter, right? If you follow even hundreds of accounts, if Twitter would show you every single tweet, it really would be unreadable. So Facebook has an algorithm, right, which is now quite well known, it's been discussed, which determines what it thinks are the most relevant Facebook posts for you, and this is what you see. Now, there's a little button in your Facebook feed, you can turn it off to see everything. The point is that if you see everything, it can be really overwhelming. So most people leave it on, and then you can really depend on the algorithm to know what your friends are saying, what you think about them, who to follow, who not to follow. And people try to guess how this algorithm works, but because you can say it's Facebook's secret source, we don't publish details of this algorithm, not because we're actually evil, not because we're afraid when our company is going to do better, but because we don't want people to play with algorithm, right? So one of the reasons the companies don't make everything open source is that when people try to influence them, just as people try to influence Google search results. So the second example of, let's say, this more everyday gray software is you have navigation. Many people have navigation systems in their car or use navigation software on your phone. And again, there is some software which determines what is the best route to go from A to B, and that's how you're going to go, but in most cases we have no idea how it works. So this is just two among numerous examples of software which actually does kind of structure our physical actions, our interaction, our communication. For example, in America there are these rating agencies which rate how reliable you are, and when depending on this you'll get different rate loan for your house. And I think in the last 2 years there is a healthy discussion which got started in different communities and also by journalists. Well, maybe this is not such a good thing, because algorithms are invisible. And again, 5 years ago, I think the word algorithm was really mysterious. But now really you see it lots and lots of newspapers. And I think it's a very good thing, because at least we should discuss it and think about, do we actually want to live in a society where our life is controlled by these kind of black boxes?
And that becomes more of a problem because algorithms are, at one hand, a property, something that a company owns. They are invisible, as you've said, and they are, at least to everyday's imagination, uncontrollable. They are controllable in a sense you can try to manipulate them, but the on and off switch and the master switch isn't in your hand.
Well, I think sometimes it is in your hand. The problem is that it's simply one switch. You don't have more control over it. So for example, in the case of Facebook, you have two options, right? Show me everything or show me what's important. And then, you don't have anything else. So you don't really have ability to fine tune it. To say, well, actually, I want to see what's important, but I want to see what's important from these people. And I would say partly, again, it's not because the companies are evil or ideological, or it's basically because of technology which is now used, called machine learning, where you can't really write down the rules which algorithm follows, right? The algorithm, the computer gets trained on lots of examples. The computer simply the computer pays attention to which posts you read, which posts you like, which posts you repost, and it builds a model, and it says this is a model which is going to determine what I'm going to show you, but the model doesn't have explicit rules. So that's another very crucial thing, is because in the last 5 years, in pretty much most cases, we moved from these very explicit algorithms, which is a series of steps to this machine learning. We basically are these black boxes. So there's not some kind of switch you can even control. So the algorithm is doing something, but even people at Facebook have no idea why exactly the algorithm decided to show you this post as opposed to that post.
And obviously, software determines many things that relate to economy, education. The idea of smart cities is becoming more and more important. And that raises a question of how many things can be actually automated. Journalism, I mean, the thing I do for a living, is becoming more and more automated. Do you really see this as a threat to some order that we cherish, that there is right now, liberal democracy or whatever you want to call it? Or is it something that's a more of a sort of a natural historical process that's already been put in place and would be hardly imaginable now to reverse it?
Well, so I think we have to kind of ask a big question, let's say 1 million kind of zloty question. Okay, like what is the purpose of automation? And the purpose in most cases is what companies, NGOs, governments, state agencies think is efficiency. So basically operating under this modernist idea of efficiency. So when you look at smart cities, the idea is that we're going to measure traffic patterns, we're going to get lots of sensor data, and then we're going to make the city more efficient, right? So for example, getting rid of traffic is a prime example. And I'm not saying that efficiency is not a good idea, but it shouldn't be a single idea, right? Because if you are, why do people move to a city? They're looking for more variety, more diversity, and even more randomness, right? Because unpredictable things can happen. You run into an old friend, people take you to some cafe you haven't been before. So if you make everything efficient, there's a danger that become randomness, unpredictability is going to go away. So you're going to end up in this kind of sort of 1984 type society, which has surveillance, but the most I think dangerous thing doesn't have imagination. This everything has become totally efficient, like in a kind of giant city factory.
And it is a good question to ask when it comes to efficiency. There is this idea behind it that everything can be programmed, right? That you can more or less precisely establish what comes from point A to point B. And one of the interesting things that you show in the book, that the most desirable outcomes are not the ones that you might end up with after using software for many, many years. The things that happen later are not those that have been programmed in the first place, right? Because we never imagined 40 years ago how would simple mouse and a keyboard become embedded in our life, and how would they change behavioral patterns and everything else. There were simple efficiency tools.
Yeah, I would even go much further to say that some of the most interesting social cultural phenomena of our times happen because people take some technology and use it in completely different ways. For example, nobody really predicted that text messaging is going to become such a big thing, right? Because ultimately it was just one feature of a mobile phone. But I think maybe my best example is actually how people use and appropriate a different technology called the city. So you go look at most European cities, and in particular cities in so-called Eastern Europe, which have this interesting aesthetic kind of communist heritage, whether it is Berlin and Karl Marx Allee, or for example, the Palace of Culture and Science in Warsaw. And when you find the kind of local, creative, kind of hipster kind of class, and people put interesting cafes and bars, and they interact with this old, kind of very kind of propagandistic architecture, and you got something very lively, right? In fact, if you go to many other cities around the world, the places where you really want to go are places which were originally had one function, perhaps industrial function, and we may still have some of it left, but we also now used as an entertainment kind of cafe or workspaces. For example, in New York, right, now the central entertainment areas, meat packing district, originally was used to process meat, and you still have some of these things left. Whereas if you go, for example, to maybe new areas, which you can build from scratch, we don't have the same depth, we don't have the same contradictions. So I think how people creatively reuse and remix the cities is a perfect example Okay, and I think what's interesting is if you're a smart architect, you say, so what should I design? Because with everything I've got design, the best thing which can happen to my design in 20 years, people are going to use it for something else.
Right. Which tells us also that there's this human factor in innovation is really overlooked today. Because if you hear all this Silicon Valley lingo, it doesn't really concern what do people do with technology. It only answers the desires that designers might have or might predict of people's using that technology they've designed for them. But in the end, I mean, the innovations misused that I like to talk about is the example of Instagram, which was meant to be a news service. Nobody uses Instagram for news, for sharing important details from the, something you would see on a BBC broadcast.
Oh. And I didn't know that actually.
And on the other hand, Twitter was more of a funny social thing, and it became the news in itself.
That's right, that's right. Well, I think I'll give you also one more example, again, from like an urban area. So you can say that perhaps, I mean, it's not a new goal, obviously, you know, it's also a modern goal to have like efficient movement in the city. I mean, the first traffic lights were introduced in 1913, which is like the high point of futurism, and you know, so it's a very modern invention. But there's this phenomenon in urban planning, and it exists, I think, in a dozen or so European cities, where you take like one area, sometimes big, some small, you take away all the lights, you take away all the parking signs, you basically let it self-organize. And according to the article I've read, I mean, assuming it's true, but in every case, it results in more efficiency than any normal area which has rules, controls, traffic lights, and so on. But somehow people, I mean, I hate this word, you know, self-organize or evolve, but whatever, people somehow negotiate, right, how we use the space. The result, supposedly in most cases, is much more efficient. So you actually take technology away. I mean, you take regulation away, because technology is also, it's a way to implement rules, lots of rules, right? So you take the rules away, and actually people are able to negotiate, you know, a better system.
But translating this to the world of digital communication, for example, because I like the urban example very much, but if we translated the word of the digital, there is this tendency to actually constrain movement, to add a tag, hashtag to everything, to express your emotions in Facebook, not using your words, but using those emoticons that had been added, which is interesting enough, because we know the purpose. It is done for better searchable results, for example.
Exactly, it's done so people can, so basically people find the images, and because research uses text, and research works best on a separate words, so that's why, you know, because, you know, it's like when you're writing paper in Microsoft Word, right? You can say how many times I use the word innovation. It's so easy, right? You know, so you can say it's a kind of technology which really dictates how people can express themselves on various social networks.
But it does lead to unexpected consequences. It's a truism, I know. It's the obvious thing to say that it leads to unexpected consequences, but it might do, because normally you are not required to, for example, geolocalize yourself, add a tag with every act of your communication. But nowadays it becomes more and more prevalent that you might actually at some point be required to do that, to self-identify more and more emotions and offline acts.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think if you look at the most recent development on Instagram, things are moving exactly in the opposite direction. Like, I don't know if it's true, but a friend of mine told me the other day that Instagram changed the rules. So now it doesn't like automatically record geolocation from your phone, it only records location, like if you can explicitly select it, because we're afraid of kind of privacy, we're afraid that somebody's going to rob your house because we know it your way. But you know, things change up and down, right? Ultimately, we have to remember that the goal of all these companies is not to be evil. The goal is not to somehow collect your data and give it to the NCA. Where basically goal is to advertising, because that's the only way, you know, figure out how to make money. So we simply wanted to spend as much time on their services, you know, and when, for example, we spend more time on any Google page, you're more likely to click, right, to click on the ad. So their goal is to, in most cases, just to simply have you spend more time on their service, and will do whatever it is to take. It's not necessarily, like, because we're not necessarily selling things directly, right? Like Facebook is free, but what we want you to do is to pay to promote your posts, and because we want you to, like, right, pay extra $5 to promote your posts, it's going to give you every possible analytics. So what we do is we kind of force people to be like advertisers or marketers or TV stations, and to think very strategically about what shall I post, because how many likes it's going to get, who is going to see it. We're going to show you your demographics of your followers. So in a way, by giving people with almost like very detailed and extensive data, like, we make your behavior more rational. Let's say 5 years ago, when people make blog posts, sometimes you have an image in the middle, sometimes you have an image at the end, and then the research came out which says if you put the image in the beginning, 5 times more people are going to let's say read or share your post. If you put video, it's going to be 25. And now every single post you see is going to start with an image above a fold, right? So I think, so this to me is actually a very dangerous thing. Like, don't think about the companies as being too rational, too efficient, and forcing to do something. We don't do it directly, but we do it indirectly, which is, I think, much more dangerous, by giving us so much information about performance of our message and post that we begin to act rationally way before only television companies, let's say, will use like ratings to figure out how to schedule our evening. So that's the danger, that by giving us so much information about, kind of giving us so much feedback, we kind of push us to be too rational in our communication.
Self-censorship.
No. Well, yes. Well, self-censorship, but yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. Like, I give you an example, right? So at some point I decided that I really want to get more Twitter followers, partly for fun. I started using all these methods, like me and my assistant write the posts, like 1 month in advance. We schedule them at the best times because the software tells us what are the best times. But when I travel, I just write things, also as they come to me. So you're absolutely right. So I think like a year ago, I was talking to some people in Russia on Twitter, and I started posting in Russian. I noticed how after 3 days, a bunch of my followers left, so I don't post in Russian anymore. Absolutely, right? So you become a broadcaster where we can say that the viewer share is really becomes your priority, and then of course you're going to not even censor, you're going to rationalize what you're going to say to whom when and what you're not going to say. So let's say we don't see endless cultural shows on TV because we have to also sell advertising. So the same thing, I'm not going to put like long poems on my Facebook.
Coming to a close, we've started with algorithm dictating what's being seen and not on Facebook, and I kind of want to come back to that with the topic of informational bubble. I work in media, and it becomes more and more interesting to me how people tend to stay within their own circle of information, how seemingly open and democratic architecture of the net actually became a self-referential circle of people who deliberately choose only to follow information that suits their political agenda, for example. And that's code-related too, I mean, because that's an algorithm-related, because that seems very innocent at the beginning. Yeah. I've seen what I've seen, but in the end, there is no paper, as in paper, exactly. That's which the same for everybody.
Well, exactly, and you can say, I mean, this is, I think, again, with danger of algorithms, that by themselves, there's nothing bad about them, except they want to show you relevant things. So if you start reading more like democratic posts, it will probably start showing you more posts from your friends when you say something democratic, right, as opposed to conservative. So you can say that, and I think this is the danger, right? So when you try to make profit, you try to be efficient, try to be relevant, you actually end up, right? You end up creating these very strong biases, even though the algorithm has no bias, right? It's simply because it tries to be relevant, right? And it's again the danger of rationalization, right? Saying, we'll get rid of any traffic time, we'll get rid of any inefficiency. And let's say showing a person who is interested in party A, when he's about party B, is inefficient, right? And so that's, I think, a big danger, right? But ultimately, we are very away, let's say, from 19th or 20th century society of factories and mass media, but when it is the same society, so ultimately is driven by efficiency. So we can say that the late 19th century and early 20th century were about efficiency of, like, okay, street lights and scheduling, right, and also introducing electricity, which kind of rationalize people's time, and factory day, right, we're kind of eventually leading to things like spreadsheets, right? But now we're trying to maybe make more efficient how we talk to each other and how we behave and eventually how I feel, right? So.
And the efficiency.
So basically, for example, if you look at what I post on Instagram, I mean, it has no connection to me. I'm basically just trying to kind of follow Instagram rules because I just want to see kind of how it's going to work, But of course, half of Instagram accounts, I find that people I follow are private, right? So you can also use these networks in private way, and I think more and more people are doing it.
The efficiency somehow went from the top systemic level to the level of individual.
That's right.
And that's an interesting phenomenon.
Well, I think, and again, I think it's not new. I think it was the late part of his life. I think Michel Foucault wrote about it, when he wrote about self-management, and I think he, of course, traced it back to Greeks, right? And you can say that psychoanalysis was also an attempt to make you more efficient by basically figuring out bugs in your system, which is some unconscious, suppressed phenomena, right? And we're also being efficient because we don't let illness just get out of our body. We kind of, the moment we feel ill, we'll take pills. So maybe what we say of social media is not necessarily, the most drastic thing, but it's definitely part of this kind of process, right? You read articles where today in many big cities, young people choose not to have any relationships because it just slows you down. It slows down your career, right? It slows down your ability to travel, right? So I think that it's a part of this larger process.
Yeah, but software mediated this in a very.
That's right.
In a very.
Because the software gives you metrics, right? This is how many likes your post got. This is how many female from Krakow have follow you versus females from Warsaw, right? Because you have metrics for everything, it gives you unprecedented opportunity, right? To basically rationalize your behavior, right? Of course, again, if you're dieting and you follow a very strict diet and you're weighting yourself every week, it may be similar, but you have to buy the scale, you have to buy particular, it takes more work. Social media, it's completely on the surface, right? So in my previous interview, I had this kind of this, a bit of a fairy tale idea. I said, why don't we create a social network, which doesn't give you, you don't know, there are no friends, there are no followers, right? You don't know who's reading your post, you also don't know how many people, and many people are just going to post whatever they like. Or maybe people are going to post only great things because they're hopefully will somebody read me. So it'll be interesting social experiment, right? But the idea is basically taking away feedback, right? So it's too much information potentially can make you too rational, and sometimes, right, another way to say it is to say, well, can we have poetry after GPS? Perhaps not.
Thank you. That was a good conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for doing research and keeping it on a very high level. And I'm going to go check your Instagram stats and see if I want to follow you or not.
Thanks.